All right, so I want to give you 3 of my most important tips on understitching. So anytime you have a collarless neckline or an arm side that you're facing, understitching is really important. So right here I have a bodice where we've done the neckline, and now make sure that it's always a 1/4 inch seam allowance. You don't want any more fabric in that curve than about a 1/4 inch. And then we're going to go through and we're going to clip about every 1/4 inch along the curve only. But what's really important is to have a very sharp pointed little scissor like this, so that when you clip right to the stitching. Okay, like I said, you want to get right next to that stitching, and your clips should be about a 1/4 inch apart. No, you don't need to get them too close, and you don't want them much further away, but again, the key is to get right up to that stitching. Don't be afraid of it. I'm going to go all the way around this curve, and then the next step I'll show you how to do the actual understitching. So I'm kind of stretching the seam out a little bit so that you can see how close these clips are together and how close I got to the actual stitching line. Okay, now we're ready to apply the actual understitching. And so just to prepare for this, what we've done is we've pressed the seam allowance over toward the facing. Both layers of the seam allowance toward the facing. And this understitching takes place a needle width away from this seam, stitched on the facing, and we're stitching right through both layers of the interfacing. But it's very important to stay close to that seam. In the industry, we call this a needle width away, a needle width away from the seam allowance. Now, another thing to remember when you're understitching is to always honor the curve. And as you remember, we have a curve here. Remember where we clipped it and everything. So we want to sew with the curve, not straighten it out, but actually stitch around the curve. This will give you a much nicer looking neckline, and it'll keep everything true and in the place it should be. Always make sure that seam allowance is against that facing or the lining. This also works very well for lined garments where you want that beautiful curved neckline and you don't want the lining to show on the right side. Just make our way around the curve. Now you can't get too close. If you end up in the ditch, you're going to need to repair that, because that just won't do. And here's why. I haven't pressed this, as you can tell. Now see the stitching so close to the stitching line. Now watch what happens when I pick this up, and I want you to see how nicely that neckline has already been shaped without even any pressing. It's perfectly nice and curved, exactly how it was drafted to be. And now I'll just go over and press that, and it'll lay so nicely, and I never have to worry about it pulling forward. So again, you can use this for facings and also for linings. Understitching.